What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, joining me as he always does for another episode of the UNC Football Show. It's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And, AJ, you got another fun show ahead as we're going to be hitting on a whole lot of topics, really, concerning and surrounding the Tar Heels. Obviously, the team coming off a 28-27 Holiday Bowl loss to 15th ranked Oregon. I think we'll probably look back at that just a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk about where the program's at right now. Potentially, we'll talk about some coaching changes, maybe some portal activity, all that kind of stuff as we look ahead to the offseason as well. So, like I said, exciting show coming up and a lot of fun little things to hit on with the season officially being behind us now. So, AJ, real quickly, let's talk about the Oregon game. I know we hit it on our three things, but now that it's a few days after the game, we've had a little bit of time to digest it, especially you had a little bit of time to sit down and think, probably with the amount of travel you've been doing over the last few days. So I want to ask you about the game and kind of, how it ended for the season, not really specifically looking at the game. I don't really want to dive into that because it's so long ago, but 9-5 record to finish the year, 4 straight losses. I know we saw a lot of fight from the Tar Heels against Oregon in a game in which they were, inch away from potentially winning it, or essentially winning it, I should say. So a lot of positives to take from the game, but a lot of negatives and a lot of worrying things, I think, for fans to take away from the last 4 games and the accumulation of that. So what are your thoughts on just how the season ended and, obviously specifically focus on the Oregon game as well?
Well, as a reminder to a lot of people, we don't really plan out shows. We just kind of talk. I
got a couple notes written down, but that's about it.
Yeah, we chat for a couple of minutes beforehand, and then we just kind of let it roll. So bringing that up, it reminded me, the day after the game, I had a connection. I flew San Diego to Dallas, had a connection there to go to Pittsburgh. And on my flight to Pittsburgh, I was at an exit row and there was no window. And I had a dude sitting in the middle here, and he was just spilling over into my space. Perhaps he should have purchased multiple tickets, and he was spilling into my space, and I'm pressed against the side. I had nothing to do.
Probably want to jump out that door, didn't you?
So in airplane mode, I pulled my phone out and I sent myself a long email, and I was just thinking of notes from the football game and football stuff. So that's actually what got me from Dallas to Pittsburgh without, flipping out and having them have to land somewhere like in Nashville to kick me off the plane or something.
I wouldn't have blamed you. That would drive me crazy.
So it was pretty long, and there were a lot of negative things and there were a lot of positive things from a full Carolina perspective. As with respect to the game the other night, I don't see a ton of negatives in the broad sense because they played a really good team. And I thought that Carolina looked like a good football team. So I said that in the three things afterwards. A few days later, having thought through it, I think that they look like a good football team. I watched a little bit of it on replay. I taped the game and I watched a little bit of it, and I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I liked the way they approached the game. I think it was totally different than South Carolina last year. I thought the team was more physical defensively. They have some issues offensively that must get fixed, and we saw it kind of trend strong in that direction in the last 4 games. And honestly, we saw that a little bit throughout the year, which we can get into in a few minutes. But I think by and large, if you can separate the bowl game from the fact that they lost their last 4, it'll allow you to have a healthier perspective of kind of where things are here as we begin January 2023. Because the losses, I asked Mac after the game, how do you juxtapose feeling good about tonight with the fact you closed with 4 losses and you have to carry those 4 straight losses for 8 months? Yeah, they have to do that, but I don't think that's going to serve as an albatross because enough changes have already been made that they feel good about Oregon, and a lot of the guys that were part of the 3 losses or 2 of the 3 losses are not there now. A lot of the ones that were part of the Oregon game are still there. So they've kind of shaken off some of that stuff that led to 4 straight losses. A lot of elements that, quite frankly, led to 4 straight losses. So I think really the mood is more San Diego. And that's a pretty good thing because I think you want to try to grab onto some positives to send you into the offseason. So I think that they have that. I do believe there's more optimism in the Keenan Football Center right now than there normally would be for a team having lost 4 straight games, in part because it's not like they lost 4 straight after losing 4 out of 6.
Yeah,
they were 9-1, and then they lost 4 straight. So they're looking at this 2 ways, and I think it's a pretty healthy way to look at it. One, the whole of the season. 9 wins, second most since Mac left. All right. You can't take that away from them. And they won the Coastal. So all the kids are going to get a ring. You can't take that away from them. Okay. They went 6-0 on the road in true road games in the regular season. Can't take that away from them. Drake, helping the program, got a lot of notoriety. And Drake was a big part of that. You can't take those things away from them. But you also can't ignore the fact that they became the first team in college football history to win 9 games in a season and also have a 4-game losing streak.
Yeah.
Which is mind-boggling. Okay. Basketball, by the way, in the same week that football set that, basketball became the first preseason number 1 team to lose 5 games before the turn of the calendar. So there's a lot of ugly markers being laid down, but there's also some positive ones for football as we're kind of hitting into. So I think the mood's pretty good right now, Jacob, and I think they feel pretty good about the other night because there were guys on the field that played football, especially on the defensive end. And I'll say this. I'll go ahead and say this. I think that people in that building feel better about where the defense is right now than they do about where the offense is. And that may surprise some people, but if you look at the trends, the defensive trend really went in the right direction the last 4 games. And I have a piece that I ran Monday morning that breaks that down. You could say what you want about, it was Georgia Tech, it was NC State, whatever. But the Oregon thing is different. You can't say that about Oregon. And that sort of connects those 4 games. Offensively, they went in the other direction. So offense was more of an issue. They have, I think, in some ways, more to fix on offense than they do on defense. But they have a lot to fix on both sides of the ball, and they are aware of that. So they go into the offseason not feeling as bad in some ways as they did a year ago, or probably really entirely because they didn't achieve anything last year. They had to make a change defensively. They didn't show up for the bowl game. There are some good things they're able to take into the offseason. And they did make changes on offense, and we could get into some of that stuff too about why. And I think that has become rather apparent now about why that was the best move for all parties. And as well as a lot of the kids that left the program and some of the ones that are coming in. So there's a lot of movement around the program right now, and maybe there'll be more movement. We can hit on that as well, Jacob. And maybe there won't be more movement, which would probably upset some fans, but I think it's understandable to a degree if there's not. So we can have at it, man. Let's just have an organic conversation.
Yeah. We'll hit on all that kind of stuff that you mentioned. Real quickly, I want to talk about, before we hit on maybe some potential coaching changes and some other themes with the defense and offense. I want to talk to you about kind of what the plan for the program is right now after the bowl game, because I believe they're going to, coach is going to take a break for a little bit. And I believe January 6th that they're going to kind of return and then kind of discuss maybe what happened then. So can you just give everybody a little bit of an idea of what the next, going back to the bowl game, what kind of the week after the bowl game is kind of looking like?
Yeah, we're recording this Monday. Mm-hmm. So it's been 5 days since they played. So they've had time off. And they're going to get together the 6th, and Mac's going to meet with Gene. He's that's going to be the most important meeting, because it's not like he can have a meeting with Chip about how the offense did and hold Chip accountable for it. No. They'll discuss more the tweaks, or as Hubert would say, the tweaks and pivots that they have to make moving forward. With Gene, it's going to be a harder discussion simply because there has to be a lot of full evaluation on that side of the ball. And Mac is preparing. I know he's taking some time off, which he should, because they started July 29th, and any human being would need some time off. But they'll be prepared to have all those conversations. And Mac's not going to go into his conversation with Gene saying, okay, here's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. He's going to ask him, what do you think needs to be done? And then the conversation will go from there. And I know that a lot of people, I've been asked more about Tim Cross than anybody else on that. It used to be long ago, and I guess the fans got their wish when he moved on to Madison. But a lot of people are asking about Tim Cross because of the defensive line. And honestly, I can see why people would be highly critical of where the line is. And I can see why people would say, take a step back and say, maybe it's not as bad as you think. Maybe it's not as bad as it appears on the surface. I could see both arguments, although most of the arguments are the negative about defensive line development. So they're going to have to talk about that. And Mac's going to have to get Gene's take exactly on what he thinks after being with Tim Cross for a year, seeing defensive line development. It's not just Cross, it's everybody else on the staff defensively. Although I think the focal point is going to be up front, because that's where the core of the issues are. And I think most football people would agree with that. I think they're last in the nation in TFLs. They're third to last, I think, in sacks. They allowed 40 sacks this year, and they gave up, and they accumulated 17. So both lines of the scrimmage aren't what they need to be, and they both need work. I think they've addressed it on offense. There's no doubt they've addressed it on offense. So that's barely a discussion now. Defensively, they need to figure out what they're going to do. Now, I spoke to an extremely well-placed source in San Diego about that particular issue and was told that, look, if something happens to Tim Cross, there would be a mass exodus of guys in that room because they love him so much. Now, some people might take that as saying the players are calling the shots and all that kind of stuff. No, and I think mass exodus was a figure of speech to underscore the fact that Tim Cross is so loved and is such it might be the most loved coach in that building. Mm-hmm. And I know that when I've been around him, Jacob, you've been around him too, man, he just radiates positivity. Even when he's yelling at a guy, even when he's chewing a guy out, there's something positive about it. He's funny. He's a guy that's uplifting, but the defensive line has not progressed at the rate that you would think it should 4 years into Tim Cross's tenure and into Mac Brown's tenure in the program. There have been some guys that haven't developed that much. And is it on Cross or is it on them? I could tell you right now with Keyshawn Silver, for example, people are highly critical of Cross about him, but Keyshawn didn't get down to the right weight. So that's a coach can't make a guy lose weight. So if Keyshawn, who's highly talented, comes in and he's at 338 and they want him at 305 or 310, what can Tim Cross do about that? And then if they ask a kid to move to offensive line and he says no, and he wants to play defense, and then he decides to go look elsewhere to see where he could play defense, I wouldn't put that on the defensive line coach. KBJ, highly talented kid. He's had multiple surgeries. He's sticking it out. He played some against Oregon. I think he's someone that likes where he is. I don't think you can fault Tim Cross for that. Miles Murphy had improved a lot. His sophomore year, he was really good. He was getting projected as a third, fourth round pick this coming spring. And then he has the ankle injury. People may not know this, but he went like a month, 3 weeks or a month, basically without practicing. The injury was so bad. So you can't fault Tim Cross for Miles Murphy stepping back this year. Things happen in football where guys are affected, and there's nothing a coach can do about it. And I will also throw this in there too. If people are going to be highly critical about player development in that front, they need to be honest and recognize that Ray Bahasic came from literally out of nowhere and was an all-ACC honorable mention defensive lineman, nose guard. And had he not gotten hurt this year, I think they would have been a little bit better toward the end of the year because he was one of their better players. Kevin Hester played 1 year of football in high school. He was a basketball player, and look how he's developed. He's someone that will be in an NFL camp when his days are over at North Carolina. I'm not saying he'll make a roster, but he'll be in a camp. Cross should get credit for their development if he's going to get criticized for some other guy's lack of development. So I don't think there'll be a change there because what I was told by this very well-placed source is that it's very, very unlikely. Now, the conversation between Mac and Gene may take them in a different direction there, and they may decide to make a change. I don't know. But right now, I would say it's unlikely. I'm not going to say it won't happen because that would be stupid on my part as a journalist to plant that flag in the soil. But I was given full indication that it's highly, highly unlikely a change will be made there. But there might be some tweaking in approaches. And I do think part of that tweaking is going to be maybe trim some guys down. Mac hinted when the press conference was really short in San Diego, and it was terrible. We didn't really get much out of it. So Mac was gracious and gave the few of us that travel and cover the team some time outside the hallway, outside the press room. And one of the things he hit on was, Kamen Rucker got the only sack that night, and he's twitchy. Mac said a couple of times, he's twitchy. Maybe we're too big. So I think you might see the defensive front trim down a little bit and look to get a little bit twitchier, if you will. Because if you're too big and you have a hard time shedding a blocker, even though you're maybe bigger than the offensive lineman or bigger than what the offensive lineman normally goes up against, but the lineman can kind of handle you long enough because it takes you time to elude the block. You don't need to be doubled. So if there's no double teams happening on the offensive line, it limits your blitz lanes and it just kind of limits a lot of stuff, right? But if you have to, if you're a little twitchier, because of that, a Jahvaree Ritzie occupies a second blocker or Murphy occupies a second blocker, it opens up potential blitz lanes. And it just makes things easier because the offense then becomes 8 on 10 because the quarterback's not blocking anybody. So those are the kinds of things they need to improve. And if they do that, there'll be a dramatic change in what their results and their numbers are up front. So I would expect one change to be maybe trimming down a little bit up front, maybe emphasize getting a little bit quicker. And as Max said, getting a little bit twitchier. If you want to think twitchy, just think of Cameron Rucker. The epitome of twitchiness there. I think Ritzie could be unbelievably twitchy. And he's not super big as it is. If you go back and watch the game the other night, our vantage point was behind home plate for the Padres game. So we had a little bit different angle. And Jahvaree was pretty quick at times. And he was laterally quick. I think he has a chance to have a great year next year because he's one of the guys that doesn't have to get super twitchy because he kind of already is. I just think he has to get better off the block, get off the snap. And that could be a huge difference for someone like him. Maybe he has to get a little bit stronger too. So that's kind of where things stand with the elephant in the room, if you will. And it will be interesting to see what those conversations on January 6th render.
Yeah, it will be, because I think there's a lot of fans out there. I'll just go ahead and say it. There's a lot of fans out there that just think Tim Cross is gone. No doubt in their mind, he's gone. And I get it in some ways, because when you look at the stats, like you mentioned, I think Carolina ranks 129th nationally out of 131 teams in total sacks. And if you look at the teams around them, 2 below them are South Florida and Colorado. 2 coaching changes. I think they won a combined 4 games, maybe, if that. I know Colorado won 2 games. I don't remember how many South Florida won. Right ahead of them's Tulsa, Arizona, and even Oregon ranked 125th out of 131 teams in sacks. So even a team like that can struggle and still produce. And that, to me, AJ, to focus in on the defensive line, it really is the whole team goes. This is going to be my message all offseason, because I think it's true. And I genuinely think it's this simple. Like you mentioned, now how do you get the defensive line better? You mentioned trimming down. I do think that may be something they need to do based on Mac Brown's comments. But when I look at both sides of the ball, the biggest theme for me all season was the lines. And I think the lines got progressively worse as the season went on too. I'll put it that way. I think the O-line got worse in particular as the season went on, and especially was a big catalyst in some of the sputtering down the line with some of the, with the 4 straight losses. But for me, the Mac Brown's number one focus for me, and it's not going to be easy to do, I think, is he has to drastically improve both lines of scrimmage. I really think it's that simple, because I think if you look at how the defense's trajectory has gone up and the fact that they struggled all year, here's some stats for you that you put in your article. Ranked 116 out of in total defense, 86 in rushing defense, 116 in passing yards allowed, 115 in pass defense efficiency, 102 in scoring, 96 in third down, and 128 in first downs allowed out of 131 teams total. So they're ranking, top 20 worst in just about every category and top 50 worst in essentially everything. So for me, it's honestly kind of impressive the defense was even as good as it was at times when you look at the lack of production on the defensive line. AJ, we've talked about it so many times. Football is won and lost in the trenches. Yeah. That's simple. Period. Point blank, period. Doesn't matter what level you play at, middle school, pee-wee, high school, college, NFL. It doesn't matter. It starts, the bread and butter is in the trenches. If you can have a good defensive line and a good offensive line that's going to produce, you can be really good. And flipping over the offensive side of the ball, AJ, the amount of games that Drake May just won for this team was unbelievable, really. I mean, he willed this team to victory in a lot of games. And as the season went on, it felt like a lot of times he was running for his life, having to make plays, and that led to a little bit worse production on his end. So, and not to mention the lack of running game. And you can say, well, maybe it's the personnel. I don't think it's the personnel. I think if they block better, Elijah Green's would get enough running back to find holes and explode. Just go look at the Georgia Tech game. He's shown bursts that he can do that. So I don't think it's like a personnel issue with that running back room. For me, it's that simple. Both lines of scrimmage need to be drastically improved this offseason, because I think if you see a drastic improvement this offseason, I think you're going to see a lot better team next year, because I think all the other parts are there. So that's my message all offseason. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. That has to be the number one focus. Now, how do you do that? Bringing in a new O-line coach, maybe that'll lead to it. Bring a new offensive coordinator, maybe that'll help out. And on the defensive side of the ball, we'll just kind of have to see how that improvement is gone about based on what we've heard so far. Do you kind of agree, though, that it starts there? Those are two position groups that just have to be improved next year.
Now, if you have my piece pulled up, scroll down and look at the part where I note their stats the first 10 games defensively and then the last 4, because that, I think, is what's important to focus on, especially given the fact that some of those changes in personnel really occurred during the Georgia Tech game. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they were better late defensively. That's when Marquess Allen went out there and he became that was his job. He went out there, he won the job that night, and he's had it ever since and played very, very well. There is a discernible difference.
You want me to go ahead and read it out? Because I've got it pulled up right here.
Go ahead and read it out, because I think, and I was pointing some of these things out prior to the Oregon game, and some of our subscribers like, yeah, but Georgia Tech had an 88th string quarterback, and State had a guy that they just brought in out of a car wash, and Clemson, Clemson's not that good, and they lost to a backup and that kind of thing. But the Oregon performance, I think, validates the first 3. Mm-hmm. That makes it difficult to say, but for the first 3, because Oregon had its personnel. They ain't missing a few guys, but Bo Nix was out there. Mm-hmm. Their NFL running back Irving was out there. I mean, they had their receivers out there. They had their offensive line was all there. So I think that validates the narrative that the defense got better at the close of the season. You can go ahead and read this off.
Yeah, no doubt. So through UNC's first 10 games, obviously, which won 9 of those, defense allowed 460.9 yards per game, 31.3 points, and 24.7 first downs per game against teams with an average record of 6.5 and 5.5. So essentially 6-5 or 7-6, whatever you want to look at it. Over the last 4 games, all losses, the Heels allowed an average of 375.5 yards, 29.5 points, and 18.8 first downs versus clubs with an average record of 8.5 and 4 and 5. So you see the drastic improvement, even in total yards, AJ. That's going down by almost 90 yards total. It's a huge improvement.
And the points would have too. Keep in mind that Clemson had a pick 6. Mm-hmm. And then Clemson got 17 points that were gifted. They had the turnover that led to a touchdown. They had a 23-yard touchdown drive. And then even one of the touchdowns that NC State scored was a DB slipping. Yeah, he was there and then slipped. So a lot of those things weren't happening earlier. So, but even if you disregard that and say, hey, points are points, however you get them, it's on your record, which is true. But there's still clear differences. And the missed tackles numbers were better in the last 4. I think they averaged 8.5 missed tackles a game versus 10.7 previously. To some, that may not seem like a huge deal, but if those 2 additional unmissed tackles, if you will, tackles that they make as opposed to before, those could have been on a 45-yard run. Yeah. It could have been on a play where you wrap up a receiver on a short pass play instead of him breaking free for a 25-yard gain, which changes the possession and the field position. So that is a big difference. And every coach in America will take a 2 missed tackle improvement from what his team was doing any day of the week. So there were a lot of things you can point to that showed positives. As for the offense, there are a lot of things that went wrong late. I think, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Phil Long. I think he's a fantastic offensive coordinator, but I don't think it would be unwarranted if someone were to suggest maybe Phil took the offense as far as he could. Mm-hmm. And it's like if there's 5 levels, Phil took it to the 4th, and he was pushing above that 4th, but just couldn't punch through to the 5th. So, okay, we got to bring someone in who maybe can punch it through to the 5th. And that perhaps is what Mac's looking – well, that is what Mac is looking at Chip Lindsey to do. And also Randy Clements. I think that they're a package here because you have to change a little bit on the offensive line. You have to get better. Bicknell came in and changed the offensive line, get a little bit more aggressive on pass protection. I noticed that the first spring practice I saw with him, and I thought that was a good thing, but it didn't work out in the end. They still allowed 40 sacks. But how much of that was because late in the year, the receivers weren't getting open as much. So Drake was going deeper into his progression. Teams are dropping 8. Drake said it himself. They're dropping 8. We're running 4 out there, and you do the math. Phil's offensive scheme struggled having guys get open when teams dropped 8. Like they didn't have an answer for dropping 8 in coverage and blitzing out of that. So you drop 8 in coverage and occasionally blitz. Carolina always struggled at picking up the blitz. So some of the offense was playing into a very disadvantageous situation as far as what they were having to navigate against. They weren't equipped. It's like you go into warfare and you need a bazooka. That's the perfect weapon to get out of a situation, and you look around, there's no bazooka in the bag. So it's like Carolina was missing something in its offensive bag to be able to navigate through those situations. And it's no coincidence that when they had a big run Wednesday night, it was Drake making a big run. And that's one of the reasons why Mac elected to kick the field goal on 4th and goal to 2, because Drake had just gotten punished on a run play to get the ball down to the 2. And he didn't want to subject him to another hit. Now, he did say, I should have probably gone for it. Hindsight's 20/20, yeah. But I think at the time, most people thought you got to go for it because a field goal's not going to win this game. Field goal's not going to mean anything. You got to get a touchdown because Oregon's going to score again. So, but I think the deeper point there isn't whether or not Mac made a mistake. It's more Drake took a beating on that play. Like the only way they were able to advance the ball on 3rd downs on the run was if Drake ran. They have to change that. And they have to have a little bit of a different approach in order to deal with defenses that have figured them out, because they got figured out and they had no way to get out of that. And the offense, I'm going to have a piece later on, I haven't written it yet, about how the offense was equally different than the defense the last 4 games. And I think that that's going to make people wince because the numbers were pretty bad. But you and I talked about this some during the year about how, this offense is not as prolific as people think.
Yeah, it really wasn't.
You put 27 only 35 at Georgia State. You put 27 on the board at Miami. You had chances you think you'd go into Duke, and I knew Duke going to be a pretty good team, but that was a night we'd think Carolina's got to go in there and score 45, 50. Didn't. After the App State game, they scored 40 twice. That's twice in the last 12 games. And I think the most false narrative in college football this year was that North Carolina had a prolific offense.
Agreed.
Just wasn't prolific late. And even before the 4-game losing streak, they weren't piling on points like they have in the past. I was going through Oregon stuff before the bowl game, and look at Oregon scoring every week. 52, 45, 44, 47, 51, 48, 41.
Yeah, that's a prolific
offense. That's what they were every week. That's a prolific offense. You look at Carolina, after App State, you got 35, 32, 41 against Virginia Tech. You're thinking, okay, it's a pretty good offense. Then you're on 27. Then it's 38. And then you've got Pitt 42, and they scored 21 in the 4th quarter. And then you got 31 at Virginia, and you're 38 or whatever it was at Wake Forest. And then it's 17. And then you're 27, but it was 24 at the end of regulation against State. And then you're 10 against Clemson. And then look at what happened against Oregon. They weren't all that prolific. So there are a lot of things that need fixing on the offensive side of the ball. They think that they've addressed it, not just with bringing in Chip Lindsey and Randy Clements, but through the portal. They've added a couple of very prolific receivers out of the portal. I think guys are going to play right away. So I think they've dealt with that. What they need to figure out is, from a personnel standpoint, is how that running back room is going to shake out, especially with adding a 7th running back with Jordan Louis signing. I can't imagine all 7 of those guys projected in that room are going to be in those exact spots at the 1st of August. That's a lot of dudes.
A lot of running backs,
guys, a lot of talented guys that aren't going to get on the field. So Mac said that, hey, more kids may leave. More kids may leave now. More kids may leave after spring practice when more stuff is figured out, and they have very honest conversations with the kids after spring practice. So there could be more. I don't want to call it attrition, because it's not really attrition anymore in college football. It's a revolving program's a revolving door. So, so I think there might still some of that might be taken care of through that. But I really think if you're a Carolina fan, you might say, I feel a little bit better about the defense than I do the offense right now. Simply the way they played to close out the season. That's kind of a crazy thing to think about. Yeah. But the numbers don't lie. And quite frankly, my eyes don't lie. And I thought the offense was just painful to watch at times.
Oh, it was. Last 4
And you're right, Jacob. Drake ran for his life. I mean, he'd go back there and the options weren't there. I think they got too locked in on Josh. the last month of the season. And then he went, and because earlier in the year when Josh wasn't out there and Antoine wasn't out there, they're spreading that thing around. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll do that next year. I love Kobe Paysour. I think he's going to have a huge year. Look at his numbers when Josh didn't play. He was very productive. I like the kids that they're bringing in. I think we saw a taste of Andre Green. He's going to be really, really good. I like J.J. Jones. I think J.J. needs to get a little bit more physical in some of those corner balls. We saw that against Oregon, and he will. Blackwell was injured, so he's going to get an opportunity to really get on the field and show what he can do. So they're going to have a lot of dudes that can run routes. They're going to have the tight end room's going to be really good again. It's going to be intact. They got to figure out the running back room. And if Randy Clements can make a discernible difference up front with the offensive line, I think then they can have a chance of being very prolific, and Drake will have a chance to win the Heisman Trophy. And if that's the case, and the defense is number 60 in the country, then this is a club that can contend for some significant things. That's a big if, but it's certainly there. If you're a North Carolina fan, let me tell you this. If TCU can play for the national title, so can North Carolina. If TCU can go from 5-6, whatever they were, to playing for a title, North Carolina can go from 9-5 and do something similar. I'm not projecting that. I'm just saying TCU has kicked open a door that previously had been locked shut.
Oh, yeah.
In college football. And so there is a blueprint. And the blueprint is hope. The blueprint is, yes, if we tweak and make some changes, it can happen. And what do? They have a new head coach. Mm-hmm. They have a little bit of a different culture. They tweak some things. And Max Duggan is a beast. Well, Drake May's a beast too. Mm-hmm. He's got a better arm.
The parts are there, no doubt, for Carolina to be drastically improved. And we've always said that next year was always kind of going to should be the year anyway. We just look at the guys coming back and the amount of talent, young talent still, but more experienced talent that North Carolina is going to have, and continuing to recruit pretty well too. So you're bringing in an influx of that. And I do agree with what you said about the offense, AJ, because I was on the field for a handful of these last games. I was in the stadium for the Georgia Tech game, I was on the field for the State game, I was on the field for the Clemson game. And the offense was bad, man. I mean, just really, really bad at times. And I want to add this about the Oregon game, because I think a lot of people, and you can even go back to the State game too. You can go back to a lot of Carolina's losses, Georgia Tech game as well. The defense put the offense in positions to say, hey, like, just go score a touchdown. And this game's probably over. Go look at the Oregon game. It happened then again. And again, Carolina's defense almost they're an inch away from that guy even crossing the goal line. I mean, it was that close on a 4th down play. But I keep adding on, the offense had so many opportunities. Hey, just go put some points on the board like you've done at times this season. They couldn't do it. And I think that is what we're kind of talking about here is numbers don't lie. The defense has trended up. The offense is trending down. Let's not rewrite history. They were, I mean, just unbelievably bad against Clemson. I mean, that was the worst I've seen them play in years. I mean, they did absolutely nothing offensively against Clemson and looked all out of sorts. They didn't match the physicality. They didn't look as talented as they are. They made Drake May uncomfortable, running for his life the whole game. And it doesn't matter how good you are at quarterback. It doesn't matter if you're Peyton Manning or, the worst quarterback in college football. If you don't have time back there, you're going to look a lot worse than you are. And I think that really hurt Drake May down the line. And obviously run blocking too. I thought every time North Carolina handed the ball off on the end of the year, it just kind of felt like, yeah, that went for about 2-3 yards. That was kind of the runs for North Carolina. They weren't able to find lanes. And it seemed like every time they run, it was just Elijah Green running to a big old pile of defenders. So there are things that need to improve on both sides of the ball. But I think people also need to realize and go back and watch some of these games if that's what it takes to say, hey, like this defense put this team in positions to win games. And for me, it was Carolina's biggest struggle this year, especially down the stretch, was getting the defense and the offense to sync up. The defense plays well, the offense plays bad. Oh, the offense is playing really well. Well, the defense is playing pretty bad. They were never able to kind of meet in the middle. And I think if they could have met in the middle a few times, especially in those 4 losses, we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. So I do agree with what you're saying. It's easy to sit here and just bash the defense. And rightly so. They should be bashed with how they played through, the first 9 or 10 games in particular. But they did improve and the offense went downhill. Let's see if these new hires fix it. Let's see if that's what it takes to get this offense back going, because there's no doubt about it. Like you just said, there's a ton of talent on that side of the ball, but let's not rewrite history. This offense could have won Carolina games down the stretch and, just didn't do it.
For a good part of the Oregon game, they were syncing up.
Yeah. And then it kind of went away again.
If they go for that touchdown on 4th and goal at the 2 and they score, they're in a 31. What was it at that time? It was 31. It was 24-14, and then it was 20. Yeah. So they would have forced Oregon. They would have put them in a position where they had to score twice.
Yeah. Not saying that wouldn't happen, but that's a lot better.
Not saying it wouldn't have happened, but they were synced up for a while that game, and they were in position to beat the number 15 team in the country, a club that in mid-November was still in a discussion for possibly making the CFP.
Yeah.
So, and it's also a brand program. So I think our staff all thought they were going to get destroyed. I actually picked Carolina to win because I didn't think Oregon was going to show up, but Oregon did show up to their credit. Here's a stat for you about the offense. So we're going to shovel our last pile of dirt onto the offense here for the close of the season. And I was charting this because, I get fixated on certain things. I just chart and I run with until they no longer matter. This is something that carries through the offseason, in my opinion. Carolina scored 10 touchdowns on its last 52 offensive possessions for the season.
Yeah, that's tells you all you need to know in a lot of ways.
That's grotesque.
It's not good. No.
And I think that's part of what went into Mac's decision making also with going forward on 4th and goal at the 2. Wasn't a lot of faith in being tough enough up front. Wasn't a lot of faith in getting that run in, running the ball in. Not a ton of faith to roll Drake out because guys weren't getting open as much. There's just so much went south. And I think that's one of the reasons why he kicked it. Well, we better take points here and just hope this defense can get a stop. And didn't work. So I don't have any problem with what Mac did there, something because I understand what went into it. Yeah. But 10 out of 52, that's just bad because it was completely the other way around before then. Their red zone offense touchdown numbers plummeted, we fell off a cliff. So a lot went wrong. And like I said, I think maybe Phil took the offense as far as he could there. And maybe Chip Lindsey, who comes in with Randy Clements, maybe they can take it the next step. They have to take it the next step in order for this program to achieve its goals. As much as what you were totally right in saying about the defensive front, the offense has to score. We watched those games Saturday, 51-45, 42-41. Carolina fans would be complaining and want to fire the defensive coordinator if they were the winning team in either of those two games because they gave up a lot of points, right? And what did I say after App State? If Carolina wins every game 63-61, they win the national title. Well, someone's going to win a national title next week that gave up 40-plus points in the semifinals. As great as Georgia's defense is, they gave up 41 in a national semifinal game. So you got to score. You got to be able to make some stops and flip the field, get some turnovers. And this team doesn't do that either. We didn't hit on that. They don't get enough turnovers, but you got to put the ball in the freaking end zone. Yeah.
And that's just college football nowadays. Cause I think Phil Longo's even talked about it in the past, and Mac has too, just how much it's a lot harder to stop offenses now, especially in college football because of different, whether it's rules or anything like that, but just personnel and the way offenses are run, particularly these air raids. You do have to put up points. I'm glad you brought up the college football playoff games because I don't know if you guys watched that TCU game, but that was one of the most insane games I've ever seen. Every time you looked, somebody
I was in an airport
5 yards. It was insane.
I was in an airport and flying, and I know that on the airplane from Pittsburgh to Raleigh, right before they told us to shut our phones off, there were some Michigan fans who had a planned trip. They didn't know Michigan was going to be playing at that time. They were on the plane. They're like, oh, they kicked a field goal. It's 21-9. When we landed, we all had to shut our phones off. When we landed, it was like 45.
Oh, it was insane.
38 or something like that.
It was insane.
Like, what on earth happened there?
Yeah. It was crazy. I was at a restaurant, then I was like, I wasn't really watching it, but I would kind of look up because I was sitting near a TV. And I'm not kidding. There was about a 20-minute stretch where I think like TCU would score and I would look, 2-3 minutes would go by and I'd look and Michigan would have scored. And you look at the play and it would be like a 80-yard run. And then there was one TCU play where it was like a screen pass to a wide receiver and he runs like 80 yards for a touchdown. It was insane. And like you said, even at the highest level of college football this year, you're seeing very explosive offenses, what you expect, but you're also seeing defenses giving up these catastrophic plays over and over again. So yeah, you do have to score. You can't stop everybody now.
Georgia's got NFL guys all over their defense.
Oh my God, man, all over the place.
And CJ Stroud's just picking them apart.
Had an exceptional game.
You got to score. You got to score, man.
You do.
No doubt about it.
That's just how the landscape's kind of changed.
That TCU game was 39-30 in the second half.
No, it was an insane game. That was one of the most insane college football games I've ever seen because it was just weird how many, not that it was a high scoring game, but just how many big plays there were against these two really good teams. Yeah. I
remember walking to the gate in the airport in Pittsburgh, and there was actually a TJ Fridays in the airport that was open. I didn't realize it was open. It was showing the game, and it was 21-6. I stopped and looked, and I said, and Max Duggan had just had like a 9-yard run on like a 3rd and 3. And I'm like, well, God, I've seen that 1,000 times before. And I thought, wow, TCU's actually going to do this. It's pretty wild stuff. And I think it's really good for college football because the narrative has always been, well, it's just a few teams and that's it. It's just an exclusive little group and no one else can crack in. And TCU is showing that that's not the case.
Yeah.
So, and I will repeat, and this is not a silly statement at all. If TCU can do it, so can North Carolina.
No.
There are a lot of programs that can win that don't typically win a lot in college football. They can ascend to that point. And TCU kind of got there overnight. It'll be interesting to see how much they can sustain it. Carolina is making the gradual grow here. It's gradual growth. You go from 5 wins in 2 years. Matt comes in 7-6. They win the bowl game. They get a couple of those early wins to get the masses super excited. The next year, you go to the Orange Bowl, first major bowl in 71 years. Okay, you take a step back. Dave Aranda was like the hottest dude in the country last year, and his program went, I think, 6-7 this year. Mm-hmm. Took a step back at Baylor. Matt Campbell was supposed to be the next, he's going to be the replacement to Saban at Bama. Iowa State finished last in the Big 12 this year. Yeah. So Carolina had to step back last year. Mac learned some things. This year, good year, win the Coastal, 9 wins, had some, success on the road, which is something they hadn't had before. And then you get humbled late, and Mac learned from that. I think as a result, there were some changes that have been made, some nudged and some maybe forced. So Carolina is in position, if it continues to get better and take steps forward, to be in position to do some interesting things the program typically hasn't done since he left, except 1 year in Larry's year. And I think that was a bit of a paper tiger.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think Carolina can continue. Heck, even Dabo did it in year 3. I think Clemson was 6-7 in his 3rd year. And then I think year 4, I don't know if they've won less than 10 games since, maybe once in between there. But so it can just
was year 4 though. Was year 4 the West Virginia bowl game, the Orange Bowl game?
I believe so, because Dabo, I believe he came in during a season, because if you look at his first year record, it wasn't a 12-game season.
Yeah, I think they fired Tommy Bowden after Clemson got ripped at Wake Forest.
Yeah, but year 4, I think they were 10-10. I forgot what they finished, 10-3, 10-4, and they just never really.
Yeah, and I when part of those first few years, I covered a lot of Clemson when I was at Fox Sports, and it was interesting because at first, I'm never a big believer in, well, you just got to hire the assistant and everything will be fine. But rarely does a school keep the guy who replaces the head coach in the middle of the year. And Georgia Tech did that this year with Brent Key. And it'll be interesting to see if that works. Clemson did it with Dabo. And it was an interesting decision. And a lot of people are like, well, this isn't going to work. How is Dabo Swinney the head coach at Clemson? But you could tell early on there was a plan. And what's interesting is that early in his tenure as the head coach, he would take his staff to Austin, Texas to learn from Mac Brown how to run a program, how to build it, how to run it. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of things that Dabo learned from Mac that have been applied into Clemson's program. Now, Dabo's going to have to change again now, by the way.
Yeah.
He has to embrace the portal. Mm-hmm. And this isn't a Clemson podcast, but he has to embrace that. He has to embrace certain changes that are obvious. College football
Mac's kind of doing right now. Yeah.
Isn't anything close to the way it was 5 years ago. And that's the other thing we could talk about, by the way, the portal. I talked to Mac the other night about how he uses the portal. Remember, initially he said, we're only going to bring in kids from the portal that can start. We don't want to bring in a guy who wants to leave somewhere else and then he's not on the field and maybe it could be a problem or something like that. But things have changed so much so fast that he actually brought in Cavazos and Cowan from Ohio State, I guess last spring. and they weren't starters, but they ended up playing a lot. Cavazos ended up
as a starter,
the other corner, and Cowan was on the field as an upright rush end during the last Oregon drive. But Max said that no, he's not bringing in guys that'll just be starters now. You have to fill your roster. You're losing more now, so you have to replenish. You bring in older guys that are content going to a new program, have an opportunity to play a lot, and embrace being special teams guys too, because you have to fix special teams, and you get a little bit older on special teams through the portal by bringing guys up from maybe smaller programs, and that's part of what he's done here. So I actually think that the work that they've done in the portal, bring kids in, if you take a look at the group that left and the group that came in, if you were to evaluate them, I think the group that comes in, that they're bringing in, is a significant upgrade. Now, there's a lot of high-star kids that left, but it wasn't working at North Carolina for them for a variety of reasons. Some of them had hit their ceiling. So one of them just could never stay healthy. Another one just needed to go find a new place for all people involved. And then most of the kids just weren't getting on the field. So you bring in guys that have played. One of the things I really like about the 9 that they're bringing in is they're all dudes that have played a lot. They're experienced college football players. They understand what it's like to play 80 snaps, recover physically, recover mentally, and then get into the preparation the next week for the next opponent. And you do that at East Tennessee State just the same as you do at Alabama. So I like what they've brought in. I think that they've upgraded the roster by bringing in these 8 kids from the portal so far, and I suspect they're going to get a few more.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
I think a lot of these kids are going to be starters. Of the 8 off the top of my head, I would guess right now that 4 of them at least will start, maybe 5, and all of them will get on the – well, I guess if you throw in the place kicker, all of them will get on the field.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt about it. And by the way, North Carolina-related kickers named Noah didn't have a good week.
No, yeah, I think he only missed like 2 field goals all season.
Burnett and Ruggles.
Yeah. Ruggles just shanked that one. He's been great at Ohio State since he's gone up there. Fair play to him. But yeah, just big moment. I would have shanked it too. I would have hit a lineman in the back of the head if I tried to kick that field goal. So I can't really sit here and bash him. But
I would have missed. I would have been Charlie Brown. Except Lucy wouldn't have to pull the ball away. I just would have missed it and slipped on my ass. So my rear, I shouldn't say.
Yeah, oh my God, I would have been booed out of that stadium. How bad I would have looked. No doubt about it. That's
strike the ASS word from the body.
Yeah, we are a clean podcast over here, right?
My daughter will go, language.
I love it, man. AJ, I was going to ask you about that. So I'll ask you one more time to wrap it up. And then I'll give a shout out to our sponsor before we head out. But it's safe to say Carolina will probably add a few more guys, I would think, in the portal too. There's just so much time in between now and the start of the season. So,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think it's hard to lose a couple more. I think they're going to add a couple more. And there's something liberating that Mac has probably experienced as a coach as long as he's been around to not fight what's happening.
Yeah,
Dabo's fighting what's happening. Don't fight it. You just got to roll with it. And
there's nothing you can do about it, you know.
And he said something the other night that was really, really interesting. And it was, you don't get as uptight. I'm paraphrasing. You don't get as uptight about a kid leaving now as you did before because there's another one out there.
Yeah.
It's free agency.
Yeah. It's why.
And that's not to say that they don't care, because nobody has shown they care more about the kids that are leaving the program than Carolina has. They had 4 or 5 of them at the bowl game that are already in the portal. And they're helping these kids find places, the ones that are willing to accept their help. So he's open to all these things. And if a couple more go, he's going to go out and find a couple more.
Yeah.
So I think Carolina fans should feel good that a guy who's 71 and has achieved everything you could ever achieve in the sport and doesn't need to achieve more to enhance his legacy is still grinding the way he is. He's still moving the chess pieces around within the Keenan Football Center, trying to get an edge in this area, that area, and all areas in between. I think that's a positive. And that's why I think that there should be some optimism that things will work out in the positive for this program, that they will continue to grow and develop, because he's not just cashing a check. It's not like he's in pseudo retirement. He just likes to live in Chapel Hill and be around football players. And he's really grinding. He's not in Linville all the time.
No.
He's not up in the mountains all the time. And he's not at Sally's new massive beach house down there in Wilmington. He's here doing football. It's pretty much what he does.
Yeah.
Football and family. That's what he says. Football and family. And he's trying to get his steps in.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold him to that, though. I'm going to hold him to that.
Yeah,
he's got to get his steps in.
You're big on the steps too, so no, you need to hold him to that.
Today will be my 600th straight day, by the way.
That's impressive, man. Especially with your busy schedule. That's a lot more impressive than people realize. So good stuff on that, AJ. I'll give you. I
got my 10,000 in the Pittsburgh airport the other day. Literally,
that's really impressive. That's dedication,
with a bag over his shoulder and then dragging another one.
That's dedication, man. I'm telling you, that's good stuff, man. Congrats on that.
People know how busy strange AJ. Looks from
some people don't really know how busy he is. So that's 600 days. That's pretty hard to do. I'll give you a lot.
I got a lot of strange looks from people working at the airport there.
Oh, I bet, man. I bet. But hey,
even got a comment from one lady. She was emptying the trash like this. She goes, "Are you okay? I've seen you walk by here like 10 times."
Get my steps in.
I said, "It's been 20. You've been busy the other 10."
Hey man, good stuff on that, AJ. Here's to another 600 more. That really is impressive. That really is impressive, guys. Before we head out though, AJ, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, myperfectfranchise.net. You guys know them. They've sponsored every single UNC football show we've done this season and going to continue to sponsor us moving forward. So if you're looking to diversify, looking to lead the corporate rat race, gain control over your own income, wealth, schedule, what about having unlimited PTO, all that jazz, you can do that with myperfectfranchise.net. So Andy's a longtime Rivals member, diehard college football fan, and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses throughout his career. And what Andy Ludicky does is he uses his expertise to help others find their American dream through a free and very thorough consultation process. So if you guys have ever thought about opening a franchise, there's so many different types of franchises you can do. Andy can help you, can guide you along that process, and can obviously, like I said, just talk to you for a few minutes and see if this is something you really want to do. And it's 100% free. He's not going to charge you for it. So guys, call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands, 100% free. What do you really have to lose? Links in the description, not only to his website, myperfectfranchise.net, but also to 2 podcasts AJ did with Andy probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago now. Talks about the process, how it works, what it is, different types of franchises you can open, all that jazz. It's a really, really informative stuff. So go listen to those 2 podcasts and check out his website if you're interested in potentially starting your own, for opening your own franchise. And guys, I mean, new year, a lot of New Year's resolutions, want to take your career path into your own hands. I mean, what better time than right now? Talk to Andy, myperfectfranchise.net. Again, links in the description below. Massive Mac Brown fan as well. So make sure you talk a little football with him too. And make sure you tell him TarHillIllustrated.com sent you. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the UNC Football Show. We appreciate you guys watching. As always, make sure you check out the UNC Basketball Show as well if you haven't tuned into that. Basketball season obviously in full swing now, so a lot of those, we're going to be pumping a lot of those out as well. We just put a new episode out. Not sure when we're going to put this football show out, but a new basketball episode would have come out before it, so make sure you go check out that episode as well. You can find that all on our YouTube channel and our website, TarHillIllustrated.com. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.